This episode of the Young Turks is brought to you by Squarespace.
Bipartisanship takes two. I hear it takes two to make a thing go right. It takes two to make it out of sight. Tomorrow, President Obama is meeting with the Republican leaders at the White House. It's another attempt by the Obama White House to win over and try to work with the other side. But will they want to make it right? Will they make it out of sight? Because unlike other presidents, Mr. Obama is hurting for allies across the aisle. Look, take, for example, how closely Democratic Senator Sam Nunn worked with President Reagan, how President Clinton worked with Republican leader Bob Dole, or even how George W. Bush had an ally in the late Senator Ted Kennedy, at least on education. But in President Obama's case, it's not that he doesn't want to work with the Republicans. It seems to be more of a case, is there anyone to work with? Are there any honest brokers in town to sit at that negotiation table? Mark Tapscott is the editorial page editor of the Washington Examiner. Joyanne Reed is a columnist with the Miami Herald. She's also the editor of the Reed Report. Mark, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to read you a quote from Senator Danforth, a former Republican senator from Missouri. Now, you know Dick Lugar's been trying to make this happen. He's also a Republican making the START treaty happen. And Danforth says, if Dick Lugar is having served 5 terms in the U.S. Senate and being the most respected person in the Senate and the leading authority on foreign policy is seriously challenged by anybody in the Republican Party, we have gone so far overboard that we are beyond redemption. Now, those are strong words. Does he have a point here that the Republican Party has gone so far overboard that it's beyond redemption if they don't work with the president on the START treaty?
I think we are fundamentally misrepresenting the whole compromise issue. We can have a political compromise if we understand that the voters spoke 2 weeks ago and said they want less government. If we merely slow down the growth of government initiated by Obama and the Democratic Congress, that's not compromise. That's decelerization of the wrong thing. You're still going in the wrong direction. So the issue here is whether President Obama got the message and is willing to change direction.
All right, Mark, one, that doesn't have anything to do with the START treaty. And number two, how come the Republicans never got the message after 2008? Overwhelming victories for the Democrats, and the Republicans didn't work with them at all.
It has everything to do with the START treaty because President Obama is trying to talk about a treaty that really is not all that important in the ultimate scheme of things because Russia has not been an enemy of this country for 2 decades. When we should be talking about the things that the voters made very clear in November that they are interested in, which is number one, jobs, getting the economy growing again, and number two, stop apologizing for America on the international scene.
Yeah, a treaty is not apologizing, and yeah, I think a lot of Americans care about loose nukes so they don't wind up on top of our heads. But let me go to Joy. Joyanne, so do you think Obama has tried enough to reaching out over the last 2 years, and is that his mistake, that he tried too hard to reach out for these last 2 years, and or do you think he should try for another 2 years?
Well, you know, Cenk, when you started out talking about It Takes Two, I thought I might be on MTV. But then after your last guest just spoke, now I think I'm in an episode of The Twilight Zone, because apparently the Ronald Reagan START treaty really isn't all that important. We don't have to worry about loose nukes. No, I think President Obama has to come to the realization after 2 years of trying to work with these folks that there is no Republican Party. There are just some folks over on the other side who've been kidnapped by the Palinites, and they're not going to work with him. Their only interest is looking ahead to the next election and trying to defeat him, as Mitch McConnell said, to make him a one-term president. So he doesn't have allies. Now, there are people that he can try to isolate from the herd and try to work with them because either in the lame duck session, they're on their way out, like a Kit Bond or a George Voinovich, people who've been run out of the party, like a Bob Bennett in Utah, who may be willing for their legacy to try to get some of their earmarks through or get some of the things they want done on their way out the door. Or he could target a Scott Brown, who's looking real vulnerable if he looks at the re-election of the Massachusetts governor and that fluke election that he won because he was up against a potted plant. So I would probably go after someone like him as someone you can work with because they have to.
All right, Mark, if the Republicans say, hey, you know what, we're not going to compromise through the Democratic positions because we won the election, and as you said, okay, look, we got a mandate to go forward on our agenda, why should the president compromise with them if they won't compromise with him? Does that make sense?
Well, for exactly the same reason that I pointed out in the very beginning. The voters have spoken what they want. They want less government.
But how come you guys didn't listen to the voters in 2008? I mean, you never answered that question.
Real compromise means okay, maybe, as Ronald Reagan said, we don't get 100% of what we have proposed and the voters have endorsed. We only get 80%. But 80% of less government is something fundamentally different from 80% of a still growing government rather than 100%.
Mark,
it all depends on how you define compromise.
Mark,
do you think
that the Republicans really, after 2008, the overwhelming victories for the Democrats, House, Senate, White House,
Absolutely.
do you think the Republicans gave the Democrats 80% compromise?
The Democrats did not need the Republicans because they had overwhelming majorities in the House and the Senate. And if they can't get their stuff through, which they did get their major points through, but if they can't get it through with the massive majorities that they had before, their political competence, I think, is in question.
In other words, you didn't work with them. Okay, that's what I thought. So, Joyanne, let me go to a compromise here that they're maybe working on, which is, hey, we'll give the Republicans the tax cuts for the rich, which they desperately want to make their rich friends really happy. But in return, we'll get unemployment benefits for people who are hurt by this recession. One, should they take that deal? And two, what does that tell you about the two parties?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's going to be difficult maybe even to get that through. Mark Kirk was on Morning Joe this morning right here on MSNBC talking about the fact that, well, we have to pay for, quote unquote, unemployment benefits, but we don't have to pay for tax cuts. What Republicans mean when they say compromise is we want 100% of what we want, and you can nod in agreement, and that way we've compromised. That's not the way it works. And the White House is going to have to come into the negotiation better than they have so far on tax cuts. I don't think that President Obama's base is going to stand for a compromises that, for instance, extends all the Bush tax cuts for 3 years. I think that's a non-starter. If they come in and they separate the tax cuts and it's just for the rich versus for the middle class and they do a vote along those lines, I think that's a good idea. And then let's see where the Republicans are on quote-unquote compromise.
All right.
But they can't compromise on unemployment benefits. That has to get done.
All right. Well, it has to get done, except the Republicans might block it again. We'll see how it turns out. But Mark and Joyanne, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Great conversation.
New sponsor at the Young Turks, Squarespace. They help you build websites. They've got 24/7 support, and they've built some of the largest websites in the world.
They have an iPhone app, so you can edit your website on the go.
TYT promo code. 10% off for the life of your order. Squarespace.